Myanmar's anti-coup protests turned deadly. Soldiers open fire on peaceful demonstrators who remain undeterred. Neither side is backing down. So, can anything break the stalemate? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Mohammed Jamjoom. A month of protests against Myanmar's military coup shows no signs of letting up. Peaceful demonstrations are growing larger in many towns and cities. The army is firing live rounds to disperse them. The United Nations says scores of people have been killed since February 1st. 38 died on Wednesday, the worst day. More than 1,700 people have been detained. The crackdown has drawn international condemnation.
Myanmar's military must stop murdering and jailing protesters. It is utterly abhorrent that security forces are firing live ammunition against peaceful protesters across the country. We're also appalled at the documented attacks against emergency medical staff and ambulances that are attempting to provide care to those who have been injured.
Scott Heidler is monitoring the protests from Bangkok in neighboring Thailand.
Another day beginning with a funeral for a dead protester, but that didn't prevent them from coming out across Myanmar, small villages to big cities. In fact, the second largest city, Mandalay, one of the protests there turned deadly. The largest city in Yangon, many police forces as well as military throughout the different townships using some of the stepped up tactics we've seen in this past week that really saw a crackdown on the protesters. And in some cases, they're actually firing tear gas canisters into people's homes. This as international pressure is being stepped up. The United States is increasing their pressure through economic and political means. Regional neighbor Singapore, the foreign minister, saying that it was a national shame that the junta is using weapons on its own citizens. This also came as YouTube has announced that it's taking 5 channels connected to the military in Myanmar off the air. They say that is because they have been spreading misinformation through their channels. Scott Heidler for Inside Story.
Soldiers are using the Chinese video sharing app TikTok to issue death threats to protesters. Digital rights group Myanmar ICT for Development found more than 800 such posts over the past month. Some armed men have threatened to shoot demonstrators in the head. TikTok says it's removing the videos. Let's now speak to a protester in Yangon. She's asked to remain anonymous for her safety. I know how risky this is for you to be joining us, so I thank you very much for doing so. I want to ask you first just how bad the situation is, and are you concerned that the violence by the military and the security forces being directed toward the protesters is only going to get worse?
I think the situation is pretty bad. I'm based in Yangon, so I can't really say for what's happening outside as much, but I know that it's a bit worse in some places like Mandalay, and there's been reports about what's happening in more rural spaces as well. This last few days we saw a lot of intense crackdowns towards protesters, and it's not just protesters; it's people who are helping protesters as well. There was a video of a house, shots being fired into a house for sheltering protesters. There are videos of people, the military going around streets and taking away people who are just walking around as well. So it's not just protesters whose lives are being threatened. It's also the average person who's just at the wrong time, at the wrong place at the wrong time. And I think it's quite bad. And I don't know how the situation is going to progress forward, but we've been hearing a lot of rumors as to the military imposing a national lockdown in Yangon for within the next 48 hours, where all internet, all phone services will be cut off. This is a rumor, but I've been hearing this from a lot of people a lot of channels and people that I've been following, and we have a lot of rumors going on as well. So there's a lot of psychological warfare going on in right now. And this morning there were also I personally heard some military jets flying across, but people have posted some sightings of these jets as well. And again, there are rumors that there could be bombs, and we could get bombed anytime. But obviously, we wake up to news of violence and deaths every morning, and we wake up to such rumors every morning. So we don't know what's true, what's going to happen. It's very hard to predict what's going to go moving on forward.
While the crackdown is getting worse, we're also seeing more and more people take to the streets, and we're seeing the civil disobedience movement growing. Do you think that in some sense the fear barrier has been broken and that people are going to continue to come out into the streets and protest and participate in the civil disobedience movement, even if they are threatened with more violence?
I definitely think the fear barrier has been broken for a lot of us. For example, this morning, people were talking about the bomb and they were laughing and they were walking around. We're all scared, but we're still moving on with our lives. And again, so I went out this morning and on the same road where there's a large protest, people a few feet down the street were having tea or selling things. They were still moving on. And it's just that when things get worse, we run. So I think the fear barrier has been broken. People are not sitting in their homes. People are doing their own life, even if they're not protesting, because, I mean, we're still in a pandemic. We still have suffered a lot of financial loss during the pandemic. So people are still doing their lives. So I think the fear barrier has broken, and I think people are angrier because the people who have been shot are young, and they're 19, 14, and they've been shot brutally. And there also have been reports of funeral homes being raided to hide the bodies. I don't know how much of it is true, but there are lots of reports of this as well. So I think people are definitely more emotional and angrier, and many are willing to take this fight to the end. The specifics of how we're going to fight or how we're going to help out, whether it's through protests or through other means, it's a bit depends on each person and their personal beliefs. But I think a lot of us are willing to see this to the end in whatever ways we can.
This is a largely leaderless movement. You have many different people from many sectors of society coming together as part of this movement. Do you have specific demands, and what do you want to see the international community do?
I think because Myanmar is a very diverse country with a very complicated political history, and not all of us are also educated the same ways. So I think what people want is different for depending on various ethnic, or depending on how you've been brought up. So I guess what I'm trying to say is the way the Burma Buddhists see things might be a bit different from the way ethnic groups see things. And a lot of non-Burma Buddhists are asking for a federal democracy. And they've been saying that this is the time to abolish the 2008 constitution and to get rights for everyone in this country and to address the Rohingya crisis. And I think one thing that I've been seeing is the Burma Buddhists who have stayed silent or who have not talked about the Rohingya crisis previously are now starting to look at this issue and are also saying that, we really sympathize with what has happened. We're sorry for not being as outspoken. We need to do this together. But of course, all of this happens within the span of a month, and a lot of the Burma Buddhists are also kept in the dark about the whole Rohingya crisis situation. It's not reported in local news channels. It's not really talked about. So I feel like it's such a complicated situation to process within a span of 1 month. So there's a lot of differences in opinions, but one thing that people are saying is to try to not split up the solidarity that we've been seeing in this country. Right now, because we don't have a governance structure, if somebody needs blood, they would post it somewhere, and someone else has to find that person to give blood. And if somebody needs something, we just ask our neighbors, and that's really important. So people are also saying to not create discussions or talks that would split up the solidarity. So it's quite a complex situation that's going on, and I think different people are prioritizing different things, but one thing for sure is a lot of people, or I would say majority of the country, is against the military, and that's the first step, and secondly for federal democracy, but I don't know how that's going to be promoted, but I personally haven't reached to a point of thinking that far yet because we're still struggling with our day-to-day safety.
Thank you again for taking the time to join us. We do know what a risk it is for you to speak with us. We really appreciate it, and please stay safe.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
All right, let's bring in our guests from Washington, D.C., Myra Dahgaipa, Managing Director of U.S. Campaign for Burma. From Yangon, Min Zhao U, Executive Director of the Myanmar Institute for Peace and Security. And from Seoul, Yang-hee Lee, founding member of the Special Advisory Council for Myanmar and former UN Special Rapporteur on Myanmar. Thank you all so much for joining us. Yang-hee, let me start with you today. How surprised have you been seeing How many people have been coming out into the streets of Myanmar despite the increase in violence? This civil disobedience movement seems to only be growing.
I'm rather surprised at the continuing number of people showing up on the streets. And I have to say, I strongly am respectful of all those people who are sacrificing their livelihoods and their lives to come out and voice their voice that we will not live under a military junta.
Min, what happens next? I mean, from your perspective, is the military only going to resort to more violence in the coming days and weeks and months?
It's very likely. What we have seen is the major movement of troops on the 26th of February. So that's a sign that the regime is reinforcing its security apparatus in many cities to initiate the crackdown. So we first saw the first day of the crackdown nationwide on February 28th and the following days. But so far, the last 2 days were pretty quiet, even though we heard some stories of the security forces coming into the protest area. The violence, intensity of violence was much lower than what we have seen the previous day. But at this point, I think the regime is testing water and trying to see how people are going to respond, and likely that they're going to use more forces in coming days to crack it down.
Myra, we've seen that the military have been changing their tactics and resorting to more violence, as well as the security forces, the police. Are the protesters going to have to start changing their tactics in order to break this stalemate, in order to try and prevail?
Well, thank you for the question. I think one way or the other, they will be trying whatever possibility ways they have. And they are very smart people. They come out with all kinds of new ideas every single day, and I'm so amazed by their courage and their boldness. And I have strong faith that they will come out with all kinds of ideas. I mean, it was so amazing to see that they're not fighting back with weapons, but hanging those sarong skirts that male in Burma used to be scared of. Do we ever think about those? But this is what the ideas that they're coming out, where the military literally have to go up on the roof of their truck and take those down and going through the instead of going through the place. So I'm pretty sure they will have other ways coming in the ways every day, and I'm really looking forward to their new ideas, and I support them from afar, and I only hope and wish that they're safe.
Yang Hee, you and Marzuki Darusman and Chris Sidoti, other experts, of course, about the situation in Myanmar, you've all set up a new group called the Special Advisory Council for Myanmar. This is a group that's supposed to provide an international platform for civil society organizations, for activists, for human rights defenders in Myanmar. How are you going to go about doing that?
Well, we're going to be inviting the civil society activists and human rights defenders to voice their wishes and to express their views through us. And yesterday, during our first press conference, we had a member from CDM express what they were going through and what their wishes were. And we also had a connection with the protests inside Myanmar. So this is what we plan to do. But also what we're going to plan on doing is to provide some briefing notes and analysis of the situation so that the international community will be informed in their decision making and try to push the international community to make decisions at timely decisions. And that's what we plan to do at the moment with our newfound council.
Min, is there any indication that the regime is willing to reverse what they have done? Or is there any indication that there are any fissures within the ranks of the security forces, be they the police or the military?
No, we haven't seen any signs that regime is indicating a signal to reverse a course for a few reasons. One is the most of the government apparatus is located in Naypyidaw, which is pretty much insulated away from the other part of the country where the protests are facing. So in Naypyidaw, it's about like 70 to 75% of the office attendance. So which is pretty much make the regime functional, at least in Naypyidaw. The other second reason was so far the units which are undertaking the crackdown and all the other military units remain to be loyal to the regime. So which is very critical for the regime's survival. And we've seen that there are a lot of the in social media, there are a lot of posts, especially TikTok, by the police and the military personnel taunting against the protester and threatening against the protesters. So these are signs that these people tend to be quite aggressive rather than having sympathy toward the protester. So for these two reasons, for the immediate time, we don't see that the regime will change the course for now.
Myra, one of the more interesting things that we've seen as a result of the coup and the civil disobedience movement is we've seen alliances forged between groups, especially ethnic minorities, that maybe wouldn't normally have these alliances. How is that impacting what's going on, and how will it impact things on the ground going forward?
Well, certainly this is a very wake-up call moment for many of our friends and colleagues who may not or who may have never heard of other ethnic minorities and their struggles. And this is a moment where we are coming together as a country, citizens. And I think this is a very positive sign that we can look at it, because we get to learn from each other. And one most important thing is to fight against our one common enemy. And the most important thing is the unity that we brought together here is very important to continue keeping it on. And I do have a strong feeling that from here on, we will only supporting each other. Of course, I'm not naive for saying this, because there will be other ways that will be dividing us, because the Burmese military has been using the divide and rule policy for so long. That is why we don't know what's going on between each other. But I just wanted to remind all of us at this moment that this is the truth, that we have to learn and coexist together if we're talking about the democratic country of Burma and federalism. And this is, I think, the moment where we have to start to work together to support each other from different corners of the country. And it'll only get better, but before then, it's going to be quite a bit of struggle.
Yang He, the UN Security Council is set to meet once more about the situation in Myanmar. But, you know, time and again, we have seen the UNSC get together, and because of China and Russia's veto power, no substantive action is taken towards Myanmar and the military there. I want to ask you first if there is any way around that veto power to do something that would impact the situation on the ground. And secondly, how frustrating must it be for you as someone who has raised the alarm for so many years about the atrocities committed by Myanmar's military against people in Myanmar, that still no major action has been taken?
Well, it has been frustrating for me during my mandate. And today, I hope the Security Council will do a better job than it's done in the past. I hope that Russia and China will rise up to the situation and really demonstrate that they can be active participants concerned stakeholders in the international fora. China says that they will not tolerate or they will not accept the instability in their neighboring country. Then China has to show what they can do, because China has the most leverage in dealing with the Tatmadaw. And so I think this is the time where two things must be recognized by the Security Council, that now the behaviors and the actions of the Tatmadaw are of a terrorist group. They're using snipers, tear gases, bombs, and killing people from the back, shooting for the head. We've had 2 deaths by children, 14 and 16, shot in the head. And the second thing the Security Council will have to really recognize is that the fact that the actions I've called for war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide in relation to the Rakhine State and Kachin and Shan states. But this time, I'm calling that the Security Council recognize it as crimes against humanity for all the peoples in Myanmar now, and strongly refer this military junta to the ICC once and for all.
Yang Hee, let me just follow up with you very quickly about one point you were making with regards to the atrocities committed in Rakhine State. One of the things that I've noticed on Twitter, and I know that you've noticed as well, is this outpouring by many in Myanmar who are taking to Twitter and other social media platforms saying that they were unaware of what had happened to the Rohingya and other ethnic minorities, and they are apologizing for the brutality that the military engaged in. What does that say to you about the moment that we are witnessing in Myanmar?
This is a crisis for Myanmar, but I think it can turn into an opportunity where the peoples from different races and religion can come to a unity, harmonize, and live side by side. I've seen many people apologize to me for how they treated me, but that's because it is the result of the 50+ years of the military propaganda against the Rohingya, that these are enemies of the state almost, and that they are illegal migrants, but it literally boils down to these are enemies of the state. So it was the 50-60 years of propaganda instilled on the entire people of Myanmar. And anybody who stood up for the rights of the Rohingya was also an enemy of the state. But now that people are beginning to realize that the enemy of the state was the Tatmadaw, not anybody else.
Min, we only have about 1:30 seconds left. Let me ask you, how much of an impact are the strikes by public servants having in Myanmar? Is this something that is severely worrying the military right now?
There are 2 types. One, the most hurting the industry has been the private sector, especially the bankings. And the government apparatus, especially since this is pretty much based in Naypyidaw, we haven't seen the significant shutdown of the government ministry except in public health and the education sectors. Like the other sector, for example, like the labor and immigration, there are over 200,000 staff, and we saw only about 1,000 staff joining the CDM. So that is because the regime is pretty much tightly controlled of these the civil servants. However, the banking industries, if the regime could not revive the banking industries, the economic collapse could be inevitable in coming weeks.
All right, we've run out of time, so we're going to have to leave the conversation there. Thank you so much to all of our guests, Myra Dagepa, Min Zhao, and Yang Hee Lee. And thank you, too, for watching. You can see this and all our previous episodes anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. And for further discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. For me, Mohammed Jamjoom, and the whole team here, bye for now.